It actually is one of the most influential video games of all time. No, really this time. There are a few games that can actually take credit for becoming cultural phenomena beyond the games itself. But when Resident Evil was released in March of 1996, its creators didn't even believe it would sell 250,000 copies, let alone the millions sold of the first game alone. And to further that point, they had no idea how important the game they were making actually was, or rather, would be. Today we're going to be taking a look back at the original Resident Evil and talking about it and parts of the series in depth with a very special guest. We'll talk about the game and its legacy some 25 years later, all the things we love and hate about the series and more. So stick around and join us for a zombie-filled trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 30th episode of our video game podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week we take a look back at one game from the current week in gaming history and we talk about it. Along the way, we hope to teach you something new about the game itself and maybe even the world around it. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my brother, who's been doing the zombie thing since before it was cool. My brother, Rob Casson. Rob, where'd your brains go?
Well, Dave, I'd have to say I don't think they've ever been there. I just kind of just do, and I just walk around, see food, smell food.
That's probably one of the most accurate
Oh.
depictions of you I've ever had so far in these 30 episodes. I see food, I eat food.
He's on a seafood diet. He sees food and he eats it.
Dave, did you hear that?
What the hell was that?
I'm sorry, I saw the pun. I had to do it.
That was different.
Guys.
Hey, who's
hey.
that? What the flip? Did you
Colby?
bring someone along?
He's the handsome sounding fella. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of food, this is my good friend Colby.
Oh man, that's a bad intro. I'm gonna let it fly.
No, man, it's golden. See, I'm the one that's responsible for taking all of Rob's brains. Even decades before I met the man, I was just like, man, these decadent rat feces looking brains look appetizing right now. Love you, buddy.
Oh man, how y'all doing this evening?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Appreciate it. Always nice to have another person around to talk about video games. So, Rob, I'll start with you. What are you playing right now?
Well, Dave, as we mentioned almost every episode, I'm playing RuneScape.
Colby, what are you doing these days?
Well, right now, at this very moment, I'm just farming my Duel Links dailies, trying to get my characters to max level for the gems.
Rob, has it been a Tarkov week for you again? I feel like every time I catch up with you, you're playing Tarkov.
It's actually been a healthy mix between Tarkov and Satisfactory.
Oh, I've heard a lot of good things about Tarkov. My coworker goes crazy about it. It's like all he ever talks about.
Look, I gotta be honest with you. I mean, I popped in for 10 minutes the other day because you guys were all streaming it, and I got bored. I was so freaking bored. How in the hell do you just sit there and stare at like pieces of a gun and put them together and talk about it for like an hour before moving on to an actual video game?
Building the gun and making it the best you can is one of the most fun parts of the game. I mean, if your gun can't shoot in a straight line, who cares how cool it looks? Who cares what it sounds like?
Wait a minute. Your gun doesn't shoot in a straight line anyways, and that's not the gun's fault.
I mean, you have a point there, but hey, I can still make it look cool.
Oh, I tried to hang with you guys, but seriously, I was bored. I was bored. Which, ironically enough, do you know what I moved on to?
Satisfactory.
Do you know what I've been playing all week?
Satisfactory.
You know what I've been playing way too much of?
Valheim.
No, yeah, exactly. Satisfactory. No, actually, I haven't touched Valheim at all this week, thanks to Satisfactory. So thank you for reminding me that game existed, by the way.
You are very welcome, Dave.
Because now I'm past the spaghetti factory aspect. I want to actually make like good-looking, functional factories, and it's really fun to do to try to design them in a way that doesn't look like trash.
Right, you are. But speaking of games, Dave, I think we should probably bring it back around to the front and talk about today's game.
I got 2 minutes and 27 seconds out of that conversation before you reeled me in. Congratulations.
Hey, gotta reel in sometime.
Well, we're going to head back to March of 1996. We're going to look at a game that just turned 25 years old this week. And
My boy.
That's it. But first, I'm going to set the scene a little bit for y'all. Because, March of 1996 was a long time ago. The most popular song on the radio was Because You Love Me by Celine Dion. You know that hit? You know that one? Huh?
Of course.
Uh-huh.
A Celine Dion song I know is
My Love Will Go On. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Mike.
That's it.
Yeah.
Dish Network, which is all over the place now, actually started on like March 3rd of 1996, so it's 25
I
years
actually
old
did not
now.
know that.
Yeah, fun fact. On TV, the popular shows were like The X-Files, Cosby Show,
Yep.
Home Improvement. Who remembers Home Improvement?
I remember Home Improvement. Staying
Tim the
home from
Tool Man
school on a
Taylor.
sick day.
Still watch
Yeah.
that. Love it.
The Drew Carey Show, and of course the big ones were Friends and ER.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, people had a lot of time to play video games because there were a lot of gems in theaters, such as Homeward Bound 2, Girl 6, and All Dog Goes to Heaven 2. I mean, we're talking some real, cinematic masterpieces in the theaters in March.
Hey, man, I at least love the original All Dogs Go to Heaven. It was one of my favorite movies growing up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do. I really like All Dogs Go to Heaven too. I want to crap on that, but I'm not going to. It was a good movie.
Nice.
So there was stuff going on, and alongside that month, Resident Evil released in both the United States and Japan. It was March 23rd for the Japanese version and March 30th for the United States version. So we're right in between. Actually, today's the Japanese one. So
that it is. Look
25.
At that.
Look at that. Day of recording. And as we'll get it, and as we know, it would take the world by storm, and we'll get there. But as usual, I kind of like to go to the beginning and kind of talk about where game's from. Kobe, you may not know this, but I really like gaming. I call it gaming lineages. It really fascinates me to see where games come from and where they go to.
I actually did not know that. That's wild. But I do understand where you're coming from with your passion for like tracing back through the history, because I'm very much the same way. I love dissecting games not only on like a gameplay level, like understanding glitches, but I like understanding the history and the development cycle and the hell that some titles end up having to go through.
Well, that's a good spot to interject. Rob, you're one of Rob's friends, and you and I don't know each other very well. Why Resident Evil? What brought you to today's episode?
I got my start in the franchise like a lot of people did, with Resident Evil 4. That came out on the GameCube in 2005, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I would have had to been 11 at that time, but I remember my brother coming home from a weekend stay at our cousin's place, and he was just gushing nonstop about this game, and I'm like, wow, this game sounds pretty cool. I think later that summer he ended up getting it for himself for the GameCube, and I'm just watching him play it. I was too much of a chicken to play it myself at the time. It would have been my first M-rated experience with the game, because before that I was coming strictly off of like Pokemon and Mario. But like I see this action shooter with like this vast variety in enemies and patterns and scenarios, and I'm just like, this seems pretty cool. You can upgrade your weapons and all of that. And after I watched my brother play through the game, and I'm like, maybe it's time I get my feet a little wet in it. So I started my own playthrough, and I was terrified of Dr. Salvador, the chainsaw guy, for like a week. Like, he haunted my dreams until I eventually broke through that barrier, ascended to Super Saiyan Plains of Bravery, and finally managed to defeat him, get the shotgun, leave the village. But I didn't end up actually finishing that playthrough of the GameCube version. I got as far as the castle. And then later on, it wasn't until the PS2 version came out where I got that, played through that version all the way, And then ever since then, it's kind of just been a staple to get like every copy of the game on like the relevant systems that I have, get all the unlockables, beat the game on the highest difficulty and all of that. It's just a fun weekend. Level like the design philosophy between like RE2 and RE4 is like night and day. One's survival horror, emphasis on inventory management and key item routing, and the other's just, pew pew third person shooter with action elements. And both are amazing, phenomenal games in their own right that set the precedent for years to come in gaming.
Well, it's really fascinating you should say that because, going back a little ways, Resident Evil, it takes its roots from a game that has all the stuff you just talked about, your inventory management, your limited stuff. That's where Resident Evil comes from, and I want to go back a little ways. So,
Of course.
Resident Evil was first conceived by Takuro Fujiwara, and he was a video game designer that was involved in the development of many classic Capcom video games. And these are games that I myself would play as a kid in my early gaming years, like Ghosts and Goblins for the NES,
Oh yeah, that
the
one.
Commando series, Bionic Commando, and then Capcom would produce a lot of licensed games like DuckTales, Little Mermaid, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck. These all were like Saturday morning cartoons, that they'd make games for. And he also did this little weird one called Little Nemo, the Dream Master, which I really dug. It was a really cool game. We've Rob, you and I have had a brief conversation about Fujiwara before because he was one of the producers along with Inafune in the Mega Man series.
Ah, yes, that is a familiar name now.
Yeah. So we've crossed paths with him before. Most significantly, though, back in 1989, Fujiwara would direct a game called Sweet Home. And Sweet Home is not known well to American audiences because it was Japanese only until there was a fan translation of it somewhere in the mid 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. And what Sweet Home is, it's a role-playing game. It's set within a mansion, and its gameplay basically encapsulates all that same stuff: puzzle solving, item inventory, and survival. So basically, in Sweet Home, what you do is you have to explore this mansion, solve puzzles, which gives you items and clues. Then you have to backtrack to other areas to unlock things with the new items. Does that kind of all sound familiar, guys?
No.
No? Yeah.
Maybe a little.
It's funny we talk about it because it really is the roots of the survival horror genre. And that term was really first coined with Resident Evil, but is really birthed here with Sweet Home. And so you have a story, and this is NES era, right? So 1989 is NES era. So we're not talking like, the 3D polygonal graphics we got in Resident Evil. We're talking more 2D stuff and cinematics, like when we talked about Ninja Gaiden recently.
There was a lot of room for your imagination to fill in the blanks back in that day. Yeah.
Well, it's really fascinating because it tells a story through cutscenes, and it had quick time events, like you would activate a trap and have to hit a button, or the trap would get you. And the story is kind of really funny because it's Japanese supernatural horror. So you basically have a famous artist who dies but hides several paintings in this huge mansion before he disappears. And then like 30 years later, there's a team of like 5 documentary makers that set out to recover the paintings. And upon entering this mansion, they're basically trapped inside by the ghost of a woman who then makes them fight for their lives. And despite the fact that it's not known by American audiences, it's really still considered in the genre as a whole as one of the greatest horror games ever made. And it definitely laid the groundwork for the survival horror genre. Because in 1993, Fujiwara had the idea to remake Sweet Home. At the time, it was going to be a remake for the SNES, but with the PlayStation just around the bend, which was 95, they changed their idea to make it, what they wanted to do was make it a full 3D first-person PlayStation game. And so all the way back, you have this idea that started way back in 89, and essentially, Resident Evil is just a remake. I mean, in a lot of ways it is. If you think about it, it's a remake. That's what they wanted to do at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's pretty much what a remake wants to be, is be more integral with the the artists create a vision of the game that was held back by the limitations of the technology of the time.
That's exactly right.
And like, I know we're going down this memory card lane, if you will, but we even see a remake of the remake with Resident Evil Remake originally on the GameCube that comes out in 2001, I think. And that, like, just, you really see what the director wanted to happen with that game, because there was still a lot left unfinished in the PlayStation 1 version of Resident Evil.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll cover that. We'll get there.
We'll get right there in a moment, though, guys.
You know, Resident Evil was largely based on Sweet Home's gameplay system and adopted many elements from Sweet Home. The limited item inventory management, obviously the mansion setting, the puzzles, the survival aspect, the door loading screen that Resident Evil is well known from was used in that game, scattered notes and diary entries as storytelling mechanics, multiple endings depending on how many characters survive, the backtracking to previous locations, the use of death animations, individual character items like lockpicks and lighters, health restoration, and just the, you know, they're both known for brutally horrific imagery. So there was a lot of things that Resident Evil took from Sweet Home. And what you just said is absolutely where it came from. So Fujiwara himself is quoted as saying, the basic premise was that I wanted to be able to do things that I wasn't able to include in Sweet Home, mainly on the graphics front. And that with this game, he was confident that horror games could become a genre in themselves. Because let's remember, before Resident Evil, there wasn't really horror games. I don't know any other way to put it. I can think of a few horror games. I look, I obviously they had like Sweet Home, but like the only one I can particularly remember from like the NES era was Friday the 13th, because
That's a good one too. Yeah.
and I'm sure as we went through the SNES era, there was some bad horror ones like that, but there was not a lot of horror games. As a fun side note, as they set out to do this, they were building a really niche product and for a niche audience, and they only expected to sell about 200,000 copies of this game.
Talk about a leap of faith.
I know. Oh my god, like poof. Yeah, they went way past that.
Yeah, they went even further beyond.
So Fujiwara would entrust the game to a guy named Shinichi Mikami.
The man.
The man. That's all right. And he would become the game's director. For the first 6 months of development, Mikami worked alone, basically. He created all the early concept sketches, designed the characters, and he wrote over 40 pages of script during that first 6 months. I mean, it all started with him, you know? A lot of his inspirations are things that we recognize. Several of the mansion's pre-rendered backdrops were inspired by the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Rob, we talked about the Overlook Hotel inspiring something else recently, and I can't remember what it was. Do you remember by any chance? Wasn't it Silent Hill? I think it was Silent Hill, because I think Silent Hill took inspiration from Stephen King.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah,
that sounds about right.
He also took inspiration from the 1979 film Zombie. Funny enough, that's kind of where he got the idea for the zombie thing. But we're a little bit ahead of ourselves there, because at first, their first prototype of Resident Evil was that it was a first-person game, and it was going to feature the same supernatural psychological Japanese horror that Sweet Home did. So think more akin to like The Ring. What other weird supernatural Japanese horror stuff do we have nowadays? It wasn't popular back then, but nowadays on the movie side, we have some more of those.
I think of The Grudge.
That's the other one. Thank you. I could see the girl, but I couldn't see.
Yeah, the name. Yeah.
Yeah. The Grudge. Yeah. So things like The Grudge or The Ring, those are more akin to that. At one point, it eventually changed. Probably, you know, they took inspiration from Zombie, and they decided that they were going to go switch to more of an American zombie horror style that was largely influenced by George Romero films, like Dawn of the Dead. Which brings us to first person, because that didn't last very long either. So in 1992, Mikami would discover, well, he didn't discover it in 1992. It came out in 1992. But about this time, Mikami would discover the title Alone in the Dark. And that was very influential on this game, was it not, Colby?
It was everything that we came to know about Resident Evil, like the classic Resident Evil trilogy with dynamic, or rather the fixed camera angles, and I believe Alone in the Dark also utilized pre-rendered backdrops too.
Colby, I think you're mispronouncing that. It's not fixed camera. It's stupid.
No, you're just a casual.
I'm just bad at the game. Yeah, a filthy casual over here. Sorry. Whoa.
And also, yeah, to your credit, in your defense, it took me like years of going back and forth, starting playthroughs, dropping playthroughs before like I finally wrapped my head around the camera control scheme. It is not user friendly, I will say that, but once you get the hang of it, you're in for an experience. I'm so glad I did. Like it helped playing RE4 first, because that game also works with tank controls, and then it's like, okay, these tank controls are like that, but the camera's just not behind my shoulder anymore in the older games.
You know, it's so funny hearing you guys with this, because it's the opposite direction, right? You did RE4, that was your introduction, and you had to go back to Resident Evil. And so in a lot of ways, that fixed camera angle and those controls are a step back from the full movement, the fluidity of Resident Evil 4. Is that a fair statement?
Yes and no, because like I mean, you saw the tank controls that are clunky to use in 4.
That's true.
But it made more sense. It felt more natural because the camera was behind you.
Yeah.
But whereas in the classic games, like, you know, the fixed camera angles, like the tank controls were a way to navigate through these constantly shifting fixed camera angles as you navigated through the rooms, which were just ingenious workarounds for the limitations of the technology of the time with the PS1.
That's exactly it. That's why they did it. You know, they wanted to make a full 3D first person shooter, and slowly they had to come to the realization that the original PlayStation couldn't handle everything they wanted to do. The full 3D graphics wasn't going to happen, and so you're right.
Until Resident Evil Survivor, but we don't talk about that game.
Yeah, exactly. So the fixed camera allowed them to use pre-rendered backgrounds, which allowed them to have a higher level of detail. Speaking of technical limitations, there would be at one point a prototype that encouraged cooperative gameplay. And so it's kind of funny because we got that first in RE5, right?
We got that in RE0. Well, no, it wasn't co-op between two different players, but RE0 was like the stepping stone to RE5 in my opinion.
No,
it's like
you're right.
you could control two characters at the same time with Rebecca and Billy. But yeah, RE5 would be the first like completely co-op two-player experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting to me that they had already kind of thought of that concept way back here at the first one, but they couldn't make it work from the technical standpoint.
Yeah.
A couple little other interesting tidbits that I didn't really think about going into this. They didn't use any motion capture in this game whatsoever in terms of the animations. Everything was handmade. They were basically like old. I'm picturing old Disney animators that are looking at videos and books to make to draw their cartoons by hand, which is essentially how they created Resident Evil.
Yeah, there was that for the animations, and then like the intro cutscenes that were shot in like live action with actual actors, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's not motion capture. Motion capture didn't really become like staple until like the next generation of consoles, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Like until around the PS2 era. I remember DMC3 was probably one of the first Devil May Cry 3, I should specify. Probably one of the first games that I played that had motion capture, and I didn't know that until like years after the fact.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I had to think about that. Motion capture, this was about the time that motion capture was starting to first be used, because the first game to use it was a few years earlier with Virtual Fighter 2. And
okay, I can see that.
And then this same year we got Soul Edge. They were using it on the arcade fighting series, but yeah, it wouldn't really come to consoles for some time.
Yeah.
I had to think about that for a second.
That's interesting. Didn't know that.
Last little tidbit, of course, is the name. For those of you that don't know, over in Japan,
The Japan side.
over on the Japan side, this is called Biohazard. But they couldn't use the name here in the United States because it was trademarked by a band. Yeah, it was a band of all things. And so they ran an internal company contest to come up with the name. And Resident Evil was picked because it takes place in a large mansion. It's really that simple, folks.
It takes place in a large residence full of evil zombies. Yeah, just full of evil.
But it's really funny. Like, it's a catchy name. It markets
it
well.
Works.
It works. It's so commonplace now, but that's it. But yeah, that takes us to March of '96, and we have a video game that gets released to the people. And for those of you, and I don't think there's any of you, hopefully, at this point, that don't know what Resident Evil is about, is it in all honesty boiled down to simple terms. You're a law enforcement member who is trapped in a mansion populated by zombie creatures. Can I have simplified that anymore, guys?
You pretty much hit the dead. You pretty much hit the head on the nail.
Yeah, that's
or the dead.
Or the dead.
Jokes.
Man, he's got them. He doesn't have much, but when he pops up, they're gems.
Got him.
Yeah, and I'll give Colby full credit for that joke. It just happened to work out, and he corrected himself. But nope, I'm sticking with the joke.
I attempted to correct myself, but then I just said the wrong thing anyway because it came out funnier.
Exactly.
And so, like we had been talking about, this is a survival horror game. It actually, but on paper, this was the first game that there's anyone ever referred to as a survival horror game. So in a lot of ways where we know that Sweet Home probably was the beginning of it, this is for most of us where the genre began. Let's talk about gameplay, right?
Let's get into that.
Let's talk about gameplay.
The meat of tonight's episode.
We were just you were just talking about movement. I'm just gonna jump right into movement, right?
Let's do that.
You've got pre-rendered backdrops, fixed camera angles. Rob, you're clearly not a fan.
Nope. I do not like the camera angles, the controls for me.
And in your defense, they aged terribly.
It's so confusing. It's convoluted. Confusing, convoluted. No, done. Not for me. I'm sure the remakes are much better, but I admittedly haven't given them a chance because, God, did I hate tank control so much in the beginning.
RE2 remake is Game of the Year contender for 2019, that's for sure.
Yeah, the remakes are... I wish they would give the first one that...
I still... Resident Evil 1 remake is still like one of my favorites in the franchise. But you don't even have to play that one with tank controls anyways. You can play alternative controls if you want to, where the control stick movement's more one-to-one with how your character would move in relation to the camera angle.
All right, so this game was revolutionary. See, because I'm coming at it from the other direction, right?
Yeah, you're old.
Yeah, I'm old. I'm from before this. I'll own that for forever. So this game was revolutionary, and I don't think of it like it was an issue because it's just the way it was, and there wasn't anything like it at the time. You had the first control. Well, this is even pre DualShock. I want to say DualShock because I'm so used to calling PlayStation controllers DualShock, but
yeah, they're all coined that.
Yeah, we didn't get DualShock until I think a year later
with the director's cut.
So you had one stick to rotate the character, and then the directional pad would move you forward or backwards in the direction.
Move you forward to where you were facing. Left and right rotated your character, and down moved had you step backwards.
Yeah, I mean it there wasn't much to it, and I do remember like stumbling with it at first, but once you just get used to it, it's just a thing. That's it.
Where the game drops you off at for your first room is really cool because it's pretty much just this giant open room, the foyer of the mansion. There's no enemies, no hazards to trip on, nothing to really worry about. So you have plenty of time. You have all the time in the world to just get acquainted with the controls. Whereas opposed to RE2, you just escaped from police car that collided with an exploding semi. Talk about action. And you're currently in front of this car wreck that's on fire with a bunch of zombies coming at you.
I remember that.
Yeah, you're dumped right into it.
Going into RE2, like it's expected that you already know how to navigate the controls since it's a sequel and all. So like they just there were no holes barred on that. But in RE1, you have all the time in the world to figure out what button does what. You can with Jill, you could get the hang of how aiming works. You aim your weapon to aim neutral, hold up to only aim up, hold down to aim down, and then turn with left and right, like with the tank controls, but you can't move forward or back.
No, it's really fascinating that you bring that up because I'm thinking you're right. In RE2, you get dumped right into the game.
Yep.
And even to further that point, you already know what you're getting yourself into. Like the genre's been established, what's going on's been established. Like there are probably very few people that went into RE2 blind that didn't know they were buying a zombie survival horror game, right?
Unless if you're me and you saw that your stepbrother had a copy of RE2 and you had no idea what RE really was. No. I mean, I knew through RE4, but again, this was like dating back to like my struggle with tank controls at first. We only had RE2, we didn't have RE1, so I was like, oh cool, I'll pop this in. Leon's a cool character, and then bam, fire, zombies. What button does what? Game over.
Oh, Leon Kennedy.
That was me. That was me. I was like, oh god.
Imagine that with RE1, right?
I think if RE1 started like that, it would have been so poorly received.
Because it would have been different. Like in RE1, many of us didn't know. We didn't know. So you get this game right, and you're put into a mansion. Like, and you're right. It's a giant foyer, and there's nothing in there, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going on. You don't know what you're up against.
What a mansion.
Yeah, that's
Barry.
exactly.
Where's Barry?
Oh my god, that's sad. I have a spot for dialogue.
Oh, I know.
The dialogue.
I'm ready to get into that when we get there.
Oh my god.
I could meme that for days.
But I mean, like, it was so awesome. And I mean, look, most people are gonna know the iconic moment right at the beginning when you're walking down the hallway and the damn zombie dog jumps out at you. That's your introduction to Resident Evil, right?
Yep.
That's it. That's the moment when you know what's going on, what the stakes are, everything like that. That's the game. And
like what a way to set the stakes when you see the zombie dogs kill Joseph of the STARS team.
Yeah.
You run to the mansion to escape, and then you hear that gunshot as you're looking for your missing team member, and then you see that iconic first zombie just munching on something.
Yep.
And it's it's one of your missing teammates. You see the blood dripping down their face. The zombie drops the head, and in retrospect, it's in a comical manner. Like he just drops the head that has half the face eaten off. The head rotates to face the camera. The zombie turns around. That shot of the zombie turning around to face you is so iconic in and of itself. We really get into it now with RE canon because the canon's all over the freaking place. Because so Chris's story in RE1 is was pretty much confirmed as canon because Wesker mentions in like a throwaway line in Code Veronica about their encounter in the basement of the Spencer mansion, which pretty much solidifies that Chris's campaign was canon. Okay, so maybe Rebecca makes it back to the RPD station and she types out that report or whatever. But according to Chris's campaign, Barry's dead.
Right.
But Resident Evil Revelations 2 is canon, and Barry is a main character in that. So what the hell?
Yeah, I don't
think survives in Jill's campaign.
They don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. It's just all these alternate scenarios, and it's like they pick and choose which one's what, you know.
And eventually it just got convoluted that they're like, we're just gonna hit the reset button and give you completely new everything with some limited cameos from your favorite characters. That's kind of how I feel like the new stuff goes.
Yeah, and even then the canon with RE2 remakes like all over the place because how RE2 handled the two scenarios was very different from how the classic game handled it. Because in RE2 classic, depending on if you want Leon A, Claire B, or Claire A, Leon A, or Leon B for the scenarios, the story would develop differently, and the bosses that you even fought would develop differently, and the puzzles you would solve would be different, and all of that. But in the A and B scenarios, no matter what character path you pick in the remakes, they play out virtually the same. So Leon goes to the basement of the RPD. He runs into William Birkin in the monster form. He breaks through like the railing platform. Boss fight starts. You're telling me that after Leon delivers that final bullet to William Birkin, and Birkin like falls to his temporary doom, that after Leon left that room, Birkin was like, "Well, time to go to work." Puts on his hard hat and a construction and a tool belt. Soldered the metal platform that he just broke Leon through. Soldered that back on so then he could set up to ambush Claire later.
Yeah, that's perfectly logical.
Yeah, I think that's logical for a cartoon, but that's not a cartoon.
Oh,
we got on that big tangent. I think we wanted to talk about like the overall movement.
Movement sucked. Weapons weren't much better.
Very limited. Worked for the time. Like when you consider everything.
Yeah. No ammo.
I see this in like our talking points. I actually wanted to touch on that.
What's that?
So like the very limited ammo argument, I would argue that the ammo and heals were actually abundant.
If you're good at the game.
I wouldn't even say that. You could make mistakes and stumble and backtrack to the item boxes like a bajillion times and still even do like a kill all run of the game.
See, I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, like the game, I would say the issue is more just the tight inventory space is the issue rather than the ammo.
Yeah, well, okay. So the reason why I don't necessarily agree with that is because, and this is more a product of the times, right? There weren't other games that were this limited with ammo or with inventory management. Those were non-things back then. And so I came up in an era which was run and gun. You shot first and you ask questions later.
Yeah, you can't do that in those games.
No one cared about ammo. Ammo was not a thing.
That goes to my argument where you actually can kind of do that in Resident Evil, at least the classic ones. Like every handgun drop is like what, 12 bullets,
right?
And it takes like maybe about 8 or so bullets to kill a zombie, and handgun ammo drops fairly abundant in the early game. Though you can honestly just kind of bank the handgun for good once you get the shotgun, and if you're deliberate with your shots with the shotgun, just aim up and then just insta decap a zombie.
That's assuming that you can aim and actually hit something.
Well, that's the thing though. In those classic games, there wasn't really aiming. The aiming was done like on a cone-based system, right?
Right.
So like once I caught on to that, it was just like, oh, okay, I hit the fire button. If there's an enemy within range of my gun, the gun will always hit. The shots won't miss. You get a crowd of like maybe 3 or so zombies together. You aim up with the shotgun. Boom! You just took out 3 enemies with 1 bullet.
I will give you the point about the healing though. So healing in this game, you had first aid sprays and you had the herbs that you could combine together for different healing effects. Now consider for 1 second that this came out in the infancy of the internet, when really finding out things like that, like, I rented this at first, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it took me forever to figure out how the red herb worked.
Yeah, you don't, that.
I think maybe like, game manuals were
a thing.
They were a thing back then. They're not so much a thing anymore. And like, I mean, there are electronic manuals, but like not so much anymore. But like, I'm sure that's something that you could have found out if you read the manual. But like, I'm a human being. I don't read the manual.
Yeah, me either. Yeah.
Unless if I'm like an anxious kid that just bought my copy of Pokemon and I want to just have something to read on the car ride home.
You all and your Pokemon. I do not have it is the biggest media franchise in the world. I will give credit where credit's due, but it is one that has just lost on me for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, you're old.
I know. Well, and that's actually a really good point. I think part of that's generational because I don't really have any friends that are into Pokemon either. No, that's not true.
I will say in your defense, the recent titles from like the past 5 years, they've been declining in quality. Like I think the series has gone downhill since like Gen 5, and a lot of people share that sentiment. So Excited about the Gen 4 remake, but that's enough about Pokemon. We're talking RE tonight.
Saving was incredibly unique.
I loved how they handled saving in that game.
It was so freaking weird at the time, though.
It was just like, oh hey, it was like, hey, do you want to save this ink ribbon to save with till later, or do you think you want to risk going through this hallway and looting these rooms and risk possibly dying and losing like an hour and a half of progress?
And that's so true.
Like retaining that progress and saving was just as much a vital resource as your ammo, your healing, and all of that.
And that's so an element of classic games.
You wouldn't think of that like back then. Like, sure, there was like memory cards and you had to save to a block like Crash Bandicoot. You go to the save room in your lobby and that's that. Just overwrite your file and all that. In Final Fantasy VII, there's those like save points. Okay, RE, the save points were there, but it's like, nah, you need a currency to redeem that, bitch. You gotta work for that. You gotta be. I would say you have to be fickle with your saves, but like for the most part, there were some exceptions. Every save point provided you like roughly 3 ink ribbons to work with. So there was time for you, like, oh, if this is your first time going to this new save room, you can pick up the ink ribbons and go, cool, I'm gonna save now because I've been wandering around aimlessly trying to find a new save room for like 3 hours and I don't want to lose any of that progress.
Yeah, it was different. It was unique, so your point about memory cards is valid because this is still really early on in memory cards because the PlayStation was not the first console with memory cards. That would be the Neo Geo. That was the first system that had memory cards.
Okay, yeah.
Neo Geo in 1990. But the PlayStation was probably the one, not probably, the PlayStation is the one that basically mainstreamed the concept.
Yeah, put it in the limelight. Any other games that may have done that were obviously taking inspiration from this mechanic in RE.
And then the other part that made it difficult, we talked a little bit about inventory management, and you had limited personal inventory.
Especially if you're playing as Chris and you only have 6 slots. Holy crap! The speedrun route for that is a nightmare because not only did Jill have like the events with Barry to pretty much carry like a lot of the hard battles in the game, but Jill also had 8 item slots as opposed to Chris's 6. Yeah, Chris could tank a lot of hits, but like you could just be so much more efficient with your routing if you knew where to go with your items. This is assuming like you're doing consecutive playthroughs and you're just trying to like go for a good time. Not even necessarily speedrunning, but you're trying to get some of those like the new game plus rewards. I think RE1 had those where you could, depending on like the amount of heals you use and your clear time, you're given a letter grade assessment on how you did in the game, and depending on how high that letter grade assessment was, there were unlockables that you could use for subsequent playthroughs of the game.
The only one I remember, I think, was the rocket launcher for speed. That's the only thing I remember.
Yeah, and there may have been like, I don't know if RE1 Classic had multiple costumes. I know the remake did.
No,
I know 2 and 3 would have alternate costumes as well, but
I don't think the first one did at all. I really only remember the rocket launcher for speed. And wasn't so you had rocket launcher, but couldn't you unlock the gun with unlimited ammo too? Like
probably. I admittedly don't know a whole lot about RE1 Classic because for the life of me I just cannot find it anywhere.
All right, so one other thing. So storage boxes, right? The storage boxes had interconnected storage, and you kind of talked about that. And in the remake, you can actually...
I'm so glad you brought that up. My mind was going there. If you played on real survival mode, the item boxes were locked.
Yep.
Like not like you needed to find a key to open them, but like they were not connected to one another. So if you banked an item in one and you made progress, but then you're like, oh crap, I need to use this key on the store. You had to backtrack all the way to that specific and pull that key out, and then go back to where you need to use it on the door. And I actually did do a real survival run because I was curious. It was a trip, to say the least. Good luck backtracking through the mansion when you're in the second phase, and hunters have repopulated it. I will say that. Those fuckers can one-shot you.
Originally, they were not going to leave the storage boxes interconnected, and they changed their mind. They left it interconnected. Really fascinating thing about that I really did talk about during development is they actually increased the difficulty for when they localized it over to United States.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. That was a really wide belief that the Japanese had for us gamers out here, because they just were like, well, one, it was like they thought the gamers out in the West wanted more of a challenge, and it was also like to extend rental periods from like, block for a blockbuster. So
No,
like
you are right.
You couldn't beat the game in a weekend. It was a combination of both of those factors.
Yeah, so you nailed it on the head. So in this case, in the research I could find, the second reason is what's credited, that they recognized that the rental market was going to be a large amount of their sales, and they increased the difficulty so that American gamers couldn't sit down and as you said, beat it in a weekend. So there you go. Which is really funny because I know I can tell you for a fact that at least the first two in the series, maybe even the third, were all rentals for me. I don't think I owned any of the classics till later in life.
Yeah, I didn't own the classics until like, I bought the games until I bought 2 and 3 classic on the PlayStation Store on the PS3, like for an anniversary sale or something. I just still don't have a hard copy of like the PlayStation 1 games to this day.
All right, so the last thing I want to talk about, and we're having a good old time talking. Rob, you still over there? Rob, you still over there?
You alive there, buddy?
I sure am.
We haven't bored you to death, have we?
I mean, y'all are just a lot more knowledgeable than I am, so I'm just basking in the knowledge.
Just vibing.
How's RuneScape? How's your tree cutting skill or whatever it's called?
I mean, my wood cutting skill is 78, but I'm not really working on that. I'm smithing at the moment, making dart tips.
Rob's tree cutting skill is still 78. Stop the presses.
Oh, so puzzles. That was the other unique thing about Resident Evil at the time, and
yes.
one thing I got. Puzzles were really there were all sorts of puzzles. I'm just gonna go over the basic mechanics of a few for those of you that don't remember. There was you could pick up a book and examine it, and one of the early keys was on the back of the book. There was a statue you could push over the railing, and inside, after it smashes on the ground, was a gem. There were the various trap rooms. You brought up the shotgun. Wasn't the shotgun, didn't it come out of a room where you had to put a broken shotgun on the wall? Or a trap?
Unless if you were Jill and you took like this one specific route, then if you grabbed the shotgun without replacing it, then Barry would save you from that trap.
Oh.
And that's where the meme Jill sandwich comes from. During that scene, Barry pulls Jill out of the room and she's all like, "Oh, thanks, Barry." Like, yeah, another minute there, and you would have turned into a Jill sandwich. Yes.
Oh man, don't worry. We have a lot to say about
it. It was something like that. The dialogue is just
you're right.
Chef's kiss.
You're right.
God.
Do you remember? I mean, I remember various puzzles as and they changed. There were swapping out the sun and the moon at the one point, and as you got into the labs later in the game, there were computer passwords laying on all over the place. So
you needed like these electronic keys, not necessarily keyed cards, but they had like a chip in them, and yeah.
Do you remember your favorite? Like what do you remember puzzle wise?
So admittedly, again, like I don't remember a lot from like RE1 Classic, just little bits and pieces from speedruns. I think one of my favorite puzzles. Ooh, I'm thinking about maybe the There's so many,
And I know it's hard putting you on the spot for it. I know. I honestly don't remember many of them.
The one puzzle that comes to my mind, it's not necessarily a favorite, but the water sample puzzle from RE3. It's infamous for being one of the hardest puzzles in the franchise. Rob might know this if I would jog his memory a little. But recently, like last October, I was playing through all the RE games, and I shit you not, I was stuck on the water sample puzzle in RE3 for like 20 minutes. As a veteran of that game that's played through it several times, I had both Rob and our mutual friend Kiefer helping me out with the puzzle in my chat on stream, and I was just like, oh my god, this puzzle makes me want to commit a crime.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal.
Yeah, that puzzle is pretty infamous. Another puzzle that stands out is the statue shoving puzzle in Remake. Not necessarily the one where you get the blue gem, but the ones that have the suits of armor that you need to open to get a treasure box that contains a key. That comes to mind. Oh, the portrait puzzle in Remake, where you flip the switches from birth to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also liked the chess piece puzzle.
I like the chess piece
in
one too.
RE2 remake.
Yeah, that one comes to
original.
mind. That one comes to mind. So yeah, there's just a lot of good puzzles.
Lots
That was something.
And you know, I want to expand more on puzzles too, because like this is the reason why I'm so hooked on the sort of like the OG, like the survival horror Resident Evils, as opposed to like the action oriented ones like 4. Like 4 had some puzzles, sure, but it was very linear. There was minimal backtracking for collecting puzzle pieces, you know. But like the cool thing about these classic games was that like the game was very much designed to be like a puzzle box in and of itself. Like you're thrown into this mansion, many locked doors, a few unlocked. You explore the paths that you can go with the unlocked doors. You find a key item. You try out the key item on the various locks and stuff until you find progress. Repeat with various other key items that you find. It's like solving a Rubik's Cube in a way. You know, you solve the one side. You solve the bottom side first, then you solve the other sides, then you finish up with the top. You know, it's very much like that, but stretched out across like a 8 to 10 hour video game experience, assuming you're going in blind.
Yeah,
you know, it like that's just something that's really fun. It's what incentivizes the replays for me. You know, it's just oh man, this blind playthrough was around 12 hours, but I want to play it again. So I play it as the other character. I finish it in maybe about 7 hours that time, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can do a sub 3 hour run and unlock that rocket launcher. So then you just keep grinding the game out for that. That's pretty much my experience with RE2 Remake.
Yeah,
it's so fun.
You know, now that you said that, I also don't really remember many other games before this that had multiple characters that you could play through as. That was something newer with this too. So yeah, there was a lot. This is a lot of stuff. You know, and it's not a big investment because you said sub 3 hour run. You know, I looked it up and
That's a movie.
Right. The average look, I get a really big kick out of going to revisit these old games because as a kid, like I can think of renting this and I don't know if I beat it in one weekend, but the average playthrough is only 8 hours. It's only 8 hours. Like I sit on my butt and I play 8 hours or more. Not often, but I do that. I've been known to do that nowadays.
We're in quarantine, baby. That was me with Persona 5 Royal last spring. We were in quarantine. I was unemployed, and I'm like, okay, I can hack like 10 hours a day on this 100-hour plus game. Let's do it.
That's still sitting on my backlog that I haven't played yet.
It's so good, man.
When
you find the time, definitely.
That's what I've been told. I've never dived into that franchise, to be honest with you. So
Royal was my first Persona game too. I wanted to get into it with 3, but 5 Royal was my first game, and it was a treat. And we'll get into that later. I noticed you have a staple question towards the end of your podcast.
Yeah,
we'll get into that. I'll elaborate more on my experience with that when we get to that.
Oh,
but yeah,
well,
spoilers for those who are listening in on the whole shebang here.
Well, that brings us to an impasse because this is about the time where we take a look back at how people felt about the game. Colby, if you're joining us, we kind of like to look at reviews about the game, both from the critic standpoint and user standpoint, and give our opinions and make fun of them, particularly on the make fun of it part. So.
Ripping apart reviews, I would love nothing more.
Well, and 2, it's kind of
or agreeing with them. You know, see, it's nice to see content creators and reviewers like. If you disagree with them, like that's one thing, but like seeing a point that you really agree with that you just couldn't quite put into words, but they found the words for you. That's always kind of nice to see too.
Right on. Hey Rob.
Yes.
Take it away, brother.
So you look at Game Informer. Game Informer looked at this and gave it a 9.25 out of 10, saying that Resident Evil has to be the freakiest game ever made. It takes all the elements in the Alone in the Dark series and mixes it with a gory horror flick. I literally jumped out of my seat when a new demon attacked. It's spooky, scary, and above all, a frighteningly good time.
All right, so look, I paraphrase a lot of the quotes that we use because I don't need to do them
Don't tell me you
verbatim.
took that word for word.
I almost took it word for word, but what's most fascinating about that is in more than one part of the article, they use the word demon. And this was in 96.
That's what stood out to me too.
Why not zombie? It's a zombie.
Because in the game, there's Richard, that's that guy that gets bitten by the snake Yawn, and he's all like, Jill, this mansion is filled with dangerous demons. Ouch. I shit you not, he says it exactly like that when he's succumbing to the poison. He's like, ouch. So maybe it's a reference to that.
I just don't understand because everyone knew they were zombies, and more than once this is like, yeah, demon this, demon that. I'm like, oh my god, like for real, man.
It's funny that you bring that up because it's like, okay, in RE1, like they don't want to use the word zombies. Like, oh, let's retain the illusion for some reason that like maybe zombies just weren't an explored concept in RE canon at that point. But then in RE2, only like 3 months later after that game in the timeline, Marvin's all like, there were these encounters with these zombie-like creatures. And it's like, just call them zombies at that point if you're already going to use the adjective, bro.
I know.
It's so weird.
I know.
Zombie-like creatures.
Oh,
okay.
All right, Rob, what else we got today?
So IGN rates this game an 8.7 out of 10. They said, this game rules, no bones about it. Never has a game combined excellent graphics with heart-stopping action and a great story in such a way to create an almost cinematic adventure.
Great story.
I know, that's the part that cracks me up. In a moment, we're going to get to user reviews and we'll elaborate on that. But yeah, great story. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Which brings us to...
It's like a flick experience. You're there for a good time. The story is not going to be like anything to write home about. You're there for the zombies. You're there for the experience. So who cares? Who cares about the story?
So not every critic felt the same way, Rob. Am I right?
Right, you are, Dave. GamePro's critic writes that it described the storyline and cinematics as mostly laughable, but felt that the gameplay, gripping pace, and heavy challenge made the game effectively terrifying.
Yeah, I might paraphrase that one a little weird, but mostly laughable for storyline cinematics.
As iconic as they are, it was definitely laughable.
Well, I struggle with that though, because in the context, so 25 years later, it's pathetic. But at the time, what else did we have?
Yeah. They didn't have voice actors. Weren't really even at the time. Like Funimation is just now getting its idea out the door with dubbing anime in English. Like voice acting was just not really an industry there.
God, I mean, how many games were voice acted? And this is a time period where every game that had voice acting was literally just like, oh my god, this is so freaking awesome. They're like we talk about
reading the words to me. It's great.
Yeah, we talk about games and moments that are like technological leaps, and voice acting was one of them for a lot of us back then. And so, yeah, was it ridiculous? In hindsight, it was. But at the time, we were so on all the fact that there was voice acting that we didn't. Yeah. I didn't recognize how bad it was. Yeah, we didn't care. Critics liked the game. They all rated it pretty well. It was the runner-up game of the year for almost every publication. And before we go on to player reviews, can either of you tell me what was the game of the year in 1996?
That's a good question. I'm blanking out on that. Well, 96, Mario 64.
Yeah, you're right.
Wow, look at him go. I had my answer queued up, ready to rip, and Colby jumps out the gun.
You had Mario, you got it too?
I mean, I might have looked this one up just to look smart.
He had to look it up in his memory, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. Oh, boy. All right. Yeah, it was Mario 64. All right. That's how critics felt. How do players feel about this, Rob?
Well, from Metacritic, user Joni B writes that every room had its own detail. The music really suited the game, and it was unpredictable. Mm-hmm. You didn't know what was going to happen next.
Wait,
It's
was
not that.
was the music unpredictable or was the game unpredictable?
Yes, Dave.
Okay.
All right,
Semantics.
carry on.
They continue to say that it's not that easy either. You have to use your brain a lot.
Before the zombies get it.
It's an excellent game to send a shiver up your spine.
I don't know if I agree with send a shiver up your spine. It wasn't a send a shiver up your spine.
Skeletons in this game to be spooky, scary, or to send shivers down my spine.
Yeah, it was a jump. It was a like maybe I shit my pants scared, but I didn't get a shiver up the spine.
I didn't get that feeling either.
See, by the time I came around to these games, I was mostly desensitized to like a lot of the jump scares present in like those kinds of games. Like, you know, Dr. Salvador. Once you see Dr. Salvador cleave your head off with the chainsaw, you've seen that changes a man.
Right.
Although I will say with the classic trilogy, with RE3, nothing made me change my pants more than Nemesis. Just, oh, I'm just running around. You know, like, I have this wrench ready to use on the fire hydrant hose thing. Oh, Nemesis is running after me. No, 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 no. I remember that happening one night with like my buddy just came over to just drink and hang out, and he's just laughing his butt off when that happened. Didn't really get that with the remake of this game. Again, I didn't really play the original a whole lot.
Well, speaking of shitting myself, Rob, I see that the next
Oh yes, I see it too.
review. Go ahead and take what Rolly there on Metacritic.
Broly, no relation to Broly.
So user Rolly writes the camera angles, the cutscenes, the OMG, I think I've just shit myself moments. Totally worth it. The famous iconic moment in this game is when you go through the dining room to find possibly Chris's blood on the floor. Then you enter the door in front of you, turn left, then poke your head around the corner, and what do you see? A zombie enjoying his manwich. See what I did there?
Tonight, a manwich night.
He slowly raises his head and turns to you, staring you directly in the eye as if you're now his dessert. They go on to talk about the dialogue, and as we've said, it was laughable. As Colby had already said,
yep.
User Rolly says, who could possibly ever forget? You were almost a Jill sandwich.
That was the line, yeah.
That was just
Barry.
They do go on to say, nice try, Capcom.
That was dreadfully
nice
awesome. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Who could forget? But Barry, what are you going to do? I have this. He says it with that lisp too. It's great. I have this. When referencing like his 50 caliber Magnum, it's amazing.
Well, I have a few other user reviews queued up, but they're all kind of the same, and we've been going kind of long. Good game, crappy voiceovers. That's the universal. We all like the game. We like the graphics. The story was weird-ish. The voiceover, the dialogue was complete trash. But like I said, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't care. One of these reviewers actually says, I've heard text-to-speech programs that sound more lifelike than the dialogue in this game. So, which might be true.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Might be true. So,
you're pitiful.
Yeah, and another one said the voice acting has gone down in history as some of the worst acting ever in a video game. I don't know about that, but you know.
Yeah, that's a bit much, but yeah. I'll never forget when I was watching a speedrun of it on Twitch, and it's the climactic scene where Chris confronts Wesker in the basement lab in the mansion, and Wesker unveils the Tyrant, the ultimate bioweapon. He's like, yes, this is it, the pinnacle of human evolution, the Tyrant, the ultimate bioweapon. And like obviously all that but bad voice acting because it's 1996. And then Chris starts to laugh over him, and then Wesker just goes, "What's so funny? Stop it." Stop it. And like the streamer equated that line to like being an older sibling or being a sibling and your older sibling is intentionally doing something to annoy you. And I'm like, oh my god, that's it. That's it right there.
That's the one.
That's exactly what that line sounds like.
I think it goes without saying that we have a very big fan of the Resident Evil series joining us today.
Hi. Oh, I didn't bring my fan in here. Were you talking about that?
The super fan, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Zombies in space. That's what we need. We need a Resident Evil in space. Oh, that's Dead Space. Sorry.
I was about to say we kind of have that with Dead Space.
Yeah,
But we need zombie pirates first, as we touched on. Was that before we started recording? I can't remember.
I don't know. But yeah, zombie pirates, Resident Evil Village, here we come. So,
oh, dude, I'm ready.
I'm going to blow through what Resident Evil has given us before we start to move on to the gaming question of the week and wrap up for today. This was the first in, including the remakes. There are now 26 games in the entire series, in case you didn't know. We have 3 animated films and 6
are awesome.
You like the animated films?
I love the animated films. I can't speak for Vendetta, but Degeneration and Damnation, they're solid flicks. They're a solid night spent.
Speaking of things we're looking forward to, there are 6 live action films with a 7th on its way this year.
Those are not good.
What do you have any hope for the 7th? Welcome to Raccoon City. No. Well,
no.
Okay. So on that topic, how do you feel? We have 2 series coming to Netflix. One that's anime and one that's live action. Any hope for those?
I have hope for the CG one because they have a good track record. I am very cautious about the live action.
I think that's
because of the track record. My take on the live action one, it's the live action films are fairly divisive. They're like people that are like, okay, like they're solid action movies. They're a solid time, but for me, it's just like there's none of the spooks.
Yeah,
it's just you're just fighting monsters, and like there's merit in having fun with that too, obviously. Yeah. But it's just like it doesn't capture. That's like my thing about like Hollywood blockbusters and trying to do a take on a video game. They lose a lot of they lose a lot of the game's identity when adapting a film like that because the directors and whatnot are just so out of touch with that.
Well, look, speaking of that, let's talk about that. So Resident Evil is the best-selling horror game series of all time.
Believe it.
Its film adaptations are the highest-grossing video game film movies of all time. Resident Evil in itself is the highest-grossing franchise across the entire horror and zombie genres. So there's any other horror movie, any other zombie, you may think Walking Dead is huge, but nope. At this point, Resident Evil has outdone them all. From the cultural standpoint, it's honestly one of the most influential video games of all time. We didn't have games that were this cinematic at the time. There's just so much that it gives to the world. It was also one of the first games to receive an M rating, so I'd like to credit it very much with popularizing M games. Because we had Mortal Kombat a few years earlier, and
that sparked so much controversy. Holy hell!
Yeah, we talked about that in the Mortal Kombat episode. Yeah, it sure did. Well, Mortal Kombat's the reason why we have ratings to begin with, and largely Resident Evil is credited with reviving the whole zombie genre as a whole. And before anyone wants to refute that, even George Romero himself credits Resident Evil along with the House of the Dead as the primary inspirations that popularized zombie culture.
See, that's what I was about to pop in, was like, which came first, House of the Dead or RE, the RE films? But like, God, House of the Dead was so good.
Yeah, and it's largely believed that the first RE film itself, along with House of the Dead, revived the film genre. So between the two, this moment in video game history went so far beyond video games itself. Not only did it move video games like technologically and culturally forward, but it really just cemented zombies in 24th century culture too. So we've got a lot to thank Resident Evil for, because now we have Zombieland. All right. We've said a lot. Man, have we said a lot about Resident Evil.
We have.
Rob, you got anything you want to add, or Colby, you got anything you want to add about RE?
I'm trying to think anything we may not have covered. Play the games, they're really good. RE2 remake, really good. RE3 remake, if you can get it on sale, it's a good time. Do not play that at full price though. RE7, really good first person RE game. A lot of people don't like it because it's first person, but they're silly. Is a good game.
It takes place down here in the bayou, so you got to play it.
Yeah.
No, don't. That's like That's like the Candyman around here. You start that up and things start happening. So spare me, please, because I live here. So
Okay, fair enough.
all
And
right.
Colby said it perfectly. I'm not obviously the biggest fan of these original games. I loathe them, but I will always say, give it a try for yourself because you never know what you're
Yeah.
gonna love.
Oh, I think it's worth 8 hours. I mean, 12 hours if you're really bad at it. It's a 12-hour investment. That's, a weekend for some people. I think it's worth it. All right. Well, we're going to move on to the gaming question of the week. And we were talking about what such a important moment in video game history this was, and even as a kid, I can remember Resident Evil absolutely blowing my mind. And what that got me thinking was a really simple question. Colby, since you're our special guest today, I'm going to start with you. Okay.
Okay.
If there was one video game that you could forget playing so that you could experience it all again for the first time, which would it be?
I already touched on that earlier, but Persona 5 Royal is definitely a contender for that. There was another game that came to my mind, but I'm spacing on it. Persona 5 Royal, I had very much the same reaction to a lot of game. It was a very similar react. Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was the other contender. Breath of the Wild and Persona 5 Royal. Just because the whole point with Breath of the Wild is exploring this world around you and finding what lies beyond every nook and cranny. And because of that, it's a huge world, but the whole point is exploration and finding out the unknown. And once you know about it, there's not much replay value to it.
Okay.
But but Persona 5 Royal, it just, especially when you get into the third semester, when I played that, there was nothing. I never experienced anything quite like it before because it's part dungeon crawling turn-based RPG, but also part high school life sim where you invest your time, which is your most valuable resource. You only get 2 time slots per day unless if story progression happens and it bars you from spending those time slots,
Mm-hmm.
But you get 2 time slots to spend doing various things, whether it's doing laundry to get better equipment or brewing coffee to get an SP restorative item, or hanging out with your friends so that you can get special perks to use in and out of battle. So the life sim part is important. The dungeon crawling part's important because that's where the meat of the game, the dungeons and stuff is. The story of the game just tackled so many topics and themes that I wasn't quite ready for, but I'm glad I had those conversations with myself. But definitely Persona 5 Royal or Breath of the Wild. I know it was a long-winded answer to the question, but I had a lot to say.
No, that's good. That's the kind of stuff we look for here. Rob, what about you?
I try to think of old games that I played when I was young that I really enjoyed, and I'm having a lot harder time coming up with them because, Colby hit one of them right on the head. Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
For me, it's not as much about the replay value. It's just experiencing it for the first time, and I'm still, playing through it. I've never officially beaten the story mode, although I've seen it enough times to know what it's like.
Yeah.
But just the scenery, the music, the flow of combat, just everything about the game is just so different than what the series had been leading up to that, and it was so overwhelming at first. It was just something beyond anything that I could comprehend, and I still really enjoy it. Like I said, I keep going back to it every once in a while when I feel like picking up my older games, and just every time I pick it up, I'm still just amazed at everything new I'm finding out. And the other one you'll be happy to hear, although I feel it's because it's more about the replay value, because after you've played through it once, you know what to expect. It feels a little less influential, a little less overwhelming, would be Journey from our last week's episode.
You really liked that one, huh?
Absolutely. It was just a phenomenal game. The visuals, the
I did
audio,
love
just
that art style,
everything
yeah.
going through it. It was a phenomenal game. And, I know that it'll never be the same as that first time picking it up and going through it. Although I'm sure that it will still be a phenomenal game. Dave, what about you?
That's a really tough question. And obviously I write them. I've had
That's funny coming from the guy who asked it.
I know. I've had I do this every week, Colby. I have
Yeah,
lots of
yeah.
time. I have weeks. I've written these questions weeks ahead of time. And I keep coming back to all the moments in my, 30 plus years of playing video games that were iconic to me. I can still remember I remember the first game that had graphics for me, like actual color graphics, which would have been like Wolfenstein 3D. And
Oh, yeah.
I remember technological leaps. I remember the first time we talked about
My
Game of the
brain
Year.
goes there too when I just think of stuff like that. Yeah.
Mario 64. I walked into a Best Buy and there it was, because at the time they had these huge screens that were in a
Yeah.
circle around the center of the store, and I ran to go play this freaking mind-blowing game.
Yeah. I
My
know exactly what you mean.
my knee jerk though are like moments that I remember just being so in awe of, like the original Final Fantasy VII, getting to boot it up for the first time and hearing that music.
That opening, that iconic menu
Mhm.
theme. Yep.
Yep, hearing that music and then playing it, and the train scene introduction, your introduction to Aerith and your introduction to the game. That's a good one. The first time I ever played Fallout 3, and you go out of the vault and the entire wasteland just opens up behind you, and I remember being so in awe of the scope of it. And it doesn't feel big anymore because I've been there, done that, but just that feeling, because it was something so unique at the time.
Yeah.
The first time I ever played The Last of Us, and I got to the end, and there's the
Yes.
iconic scene with the
Yes.
giraffes. I recently played through both The Last of Us, and I didn't remember a lot of the first game. I'm not even gonna lie, but
Really?
I did remember that last part. And when I got there this time, it doesn't have the same emotional impact the second time.
See, like
Um,
a lot of people talk about the giraffe scene, but it didn't really do anything for me.
I think it's just because it's the cathartic release, basically. Like,
Yeah, like it's right by the end of the journey and all that
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Like I see that.
you get to see it's still Earth, it's still the world. There's still life to be
Yeah.
lived and had and loved on Earth, basically. But yeah,
Mhm.
I
The scene that did it for me was like, when Joel and Ellie confront each other at the ranch.
yeah.
Yeah, that's iconic.
I finished The Last of Us 2 like a couple weeks ago, and I played the first one right before it. Like that's been my recent thing. Those are the moments that I want to relive, that I could take back, just to be. I'm not I hate to admit it, I don't know if it's a history or if it's an age thing, but I'm not as in awe of games in the way I was when I was in those moments. Maybe it's just wisdom, maybe it's just age.
I can see where you're coming from with that, because like that was definitely me with games when I was in college. Because it's just like, well, one, I'm a broke ass college student, so I can't really afford new games anyways. I just played through a lot of the used games that I had, or lived vicariously through my roommates that could get like the occasional new game for like their Wii U or whatever. The more that I'm playing more games, I'm just trying to get into that mindset of just be like, just settle for anything that can put a smile on your face. Settle for anything that could just like, there's no like, and I'm not putting words in your mouth or like calling you this by any means. Like there's just, I might be a 27-year-old now, but there's no reason to be a jaded adult. If you're having fun, it's still great. And like there's so many times in a game where I'm just like, man, that's really cool. And then when I communicate that to myself, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That actually that's a banger. That's actually really damn cool. I'll throw in a damn in there. And then it turns out to be like one of my favorite memories of that game.
Maybe, and I wasn't taking it personal, but maybe jaded is a good way to put it, because I don't know, man. Even games that I'm excited for, and I still get plenty excited for video games. I don't feel that sense of awe. And maybe because I'm praying that the bottom doesn't fall out, because that's a common experience, unfortunately, that modern gamers have to deal with, with
Yeah,
the way
that's what I was going through like those years ago too.
they don't make games the way they used to. We
Yeah,
we
like
we
Breath of the Wild definitely helped reinvigorate that love
Oh
of
yeah.
gaming that I used to
Well, but
have.
any Nintendo game you're gonna get is a polished, finished product, but that's unique.
Pokemon.
That's unique. Okay, but that's unique to them. All right. Well, I think we did it, huh?
We did it.
I think we did it. That was Rob. Did you get your knowledge in?
More than I ever thought.
Knowledge
Where
check.
where else, Rob, can people get knowledge?
Well, Dave, Knowledge can be found at our website at www.memorycardlane.com.
I'm sorry, Rob. I must have had something in my ear. Can you repeat that for the lovelies at home and for me?
Sure thing, Colby. It's www.memorycardlane.com. What can they find at www.memorycardlane.com, Dave?
Oh, all right. So show notes. If you guys want to see all the notes and resources from my research and our talking topics, I put the show notes up on our website. There's a calendar if you would like to look at upcoming games that we're going to talk about and upcoming gaming questions. There's a way for you to join our public Discord if you'd like to talk to us and voice your opinion or contribute. We're always looking for your stories and your gaming questions. I would like to hear what you guys want to know about us. There's my biography, not Rob's, just mine. If you're curious why, go check it out. There's links to our Patreon. For only $2 a month, you can support our little fledgling podcast. That's it. End of story. Just support us. I'm not going to plug it beyond that.
Wait.
And lastly, there are links to our social media. You can find me on Twitter at David_is_wrong, where I wish video games happy birthdays. And until Rob broke my Rocket League habit with Satisfactory, I was posting about Rocket League all the time, but now I don't. Rob, what about you?
Sad face.
I can be found streaming occasionally some random video games here or there at twitch.tv/FATBOIRIPZ. Colby, what are you doing?
I'm so glad you guys asked. You can find me on twitch.tv/RazorZenkai. You can expect me to stream there every typically on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, though this week I have to shake up my schedule a bit to accommodate the fiance's work schedule. But Wednesdays I typically stream some Duel Links action, some Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. I'll either climb the ranked ladder there or do some viewer battles with the lovely viewers. Fridays I do some Smash Ultimate viewer arenas, hang out with the viewers and vibe with that. And then on Saturdays I'll play like whatever game is currently like my project game for the stream. Right now I'm doing a Pokemon Heart Gold Nuzlocke. I am losing a lot of mons faster than I can replenish them. Yeah, if I'm not streaming on that, I'm probably rambling about video games and such on Twitter at RazorZenkai. And I also have a link to my Discord server for the stream that you can find on the Twitch channel as well.
Awesome. Well, before I wrap up and take it out for the week, I just want to say thank you for joining us. It
was a pleasure, dude. It was honestly a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's been fun. If you want to join us again sometime, let us know. I'd be more than happy to have you back again. So
yeah, if you have an episode on Devil May Cry and action games, I'm your guy.
Oof. Yeah, we did Devil May Cry recently.
You just missed.
Sorry, but this was the one I wanted to get you in on, though.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Well, look. To be fair, we did it on the Devil May Cry remake. Not.
Yeah, I saved you, bud.
Okay.
Yeah. We did an emo.
In its defense, the reboot is still it's still a good trip, but like
I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was my first time playing it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very.
I definitely prefer the depth that like the style switching mechanic that 4 and 5 have. That's like my thing about the reboot is that like it streamlined it a bit too much for my taste. But hey, it gets more people into the franchise. So I'm all for it because. If Hideaki Itsuno gets more money for these games, that means he can make more of them. So I'm all for that.
All right. Well, here at the end, real quick, I'll start with you, Colby. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners or add, or this is last chance? What do you got?
Play Persona 5 Royal.
Good.
And just keep on vibing out there. Keep being you, unless if being you involves hurting people, then please stop it.
Well said. Well said. I couldn't agree more. The golden rule is what we abide by here. Treat others the way you want to be treated yourself.
Exactly.
So. All right. Well, Rob, what about you? What would you like to add for the day?
Well, first, I'd like to also thank Colby for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I don't get to catch up with you nearly as much, but
I
I'm
know it
so
should be
happy
a
to see you coming
crime.
in.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to bring you in and experience this with Dave and I, and to talk a game that I know you have great passion for. I would also like
That
to take a
definitely
moment.
showed.
I also want to take a moment, as I do every week, to thank all of our listeners. As I always say, we'd be here with or without you, but we're happy to be doing it and absolutely happy to be with friends. So if you like what you hear, let us know about it. Reach out to us. If you want to learn more about these games, give them a play. You know, we talk about them for a reason. They're always worth a try.
Absolutely.
Anything from you, Dave?
Nope. I say way too much every week. I'm surprised people are coming back to listen to me, but they are. So thank you. If you're still with me, I appreciate you very much. And come join. Send me an email. Come be a guest. Come on our Discord. If this episode was not enough of an indication, I love the discourse, and it goes both ways, ladies and gentlemen. Come talk video games with me. I will share it with anyone who wants to join me. I think that'll do it. Yeah? We good?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, next week, Rob, we're going back to the beginning. And I mean the beginning to one of the earliest games in video game history. We're going to be taking a look at a game that is a direct inspiration for so many other games after it. It's the direct inspiration that the very first commercial arcade games, which were Galaxy Game and Computer Space, took their inspiration from. In fact, this game was the first known video game to be played at multiple computer installations. So the first game ever that was installed in more than one place. Next week, we're going to take a look back at, we're going all the way back to 1962. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, in case you didn't know it, video game history goes all the way back to the 1960s. And we're going to be looking at Space War. And along with it, some of the video game history that comes before it, the video game history that comes after it. Obviously, there's not a lot to talk about with some of the more basic games of the 60s, but we're going to look at the history of the games and the technology and where it came from and where it led to as we got into the golden era of arcades. So, as part of our look at the early years of video game history, Rob and I, and he's about to find out for the first time, are also going to be talking about our own earliest memories of our video game hobby. So, wink, wink, prepare yourself. And we're going to talk about how that brought us to where we are today. So, if you want a pretty strong dose of like real video game history, join us again next week as we take another nostalgia-filled trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Da-da-ba-ba-ba-ya-ba-doo-wah.